Sorry about that. So, yeah, so we're delighted to have Kat here today. And Kat is a qualified integrative counsellor. She has her own practice in London. And before that, she's worked in multiple places. So for an NHS programme called Talk Wandsworth at a South London practice, and at the bereavement team at the Royal Trinity Hospital. We're really excited to have you here today, Kat. And we'd like to run this like an interactive session. So I'm going to hand over to Kat to lead, but if things come up for you, if you want to share, feel free to unmute yourself, to comment. If you don't want to share anything verbally, you can send a message in the chat and I can field questions for you as well. And yeah, I'm going to hand over to Kat. Thanks for being here, Kat, and thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody. It's nice to see some friendly faces. Just one thing, right? Because as Emily said, I'd love to have it quite interactive, right? Because if I understand, right, we're dealing with the topic, you know, difficult feelings, and we're all here for the same reason. And grief can be so incredibly isolating. So I hope really today, this is not just me talking at you, this is for you, right? So all together, sort of, you know, hopefully at the end of today, we come away, you know, having maybe found something that is helpful. The thing is, I see a couple of people have not got their video on. They might be a bit shy. I understand that. It's not for everyone. I would, if you could, you don't have to. If you could maybe switch your videos on, it would be quite nice because it helps, you know, if somebody wanted to say something, there could be a raised hand, so sort of a visual cue, but it's okay if you don't want to. So I'm going to start with just, you know, Emily introduced me a little bit, but maybe it would just, sort of for context, would be quite helpful to see how I got into bereavement counselling. So bereavement and loss in itself, first of all, it's everywhere, right? It doesn't even have to be sort of, so to speak, the big one, you know, the loss of an actual person. Grief and losses everywhere. We're talking job losses, relationship losses, identity. So it's everywhere. And me as a very young person, I think it might have started at, at the age of 12. I was sort of very, I don't know, maybe a bit obsessed with loss. And it was always the big one. There was anxiety, and I'm going to sort of talk about, you know, sort of death anxiety later on. But there was always an interest. Then I started, you know, my counseling training, and I always had the feeling, you know, what can I do for somebody who lost someone? Because I can't give nothing, you know, I can't give them what they've lost. I can't do it. But here's the bit about loss is, before a loss occurs, there was a lot of life. And in life, there's a lot of things that happen. So loss isn't just a loss of the physicality, the person not being there, but the relationship you have with the person. And I'm somebody, you know, when I'm a little bit scared and when I don't really know how to do this, I just got to do it. So I joined the bereavement counselling service at the Royal Trinity Hospice in London. And absolutely invaluable, because grief is oh, that's fine, Rich. Okay. You know, grief is part of life. It's a very important part of life. It's very crucial, and we, you know, most people have to do it at some point. But enough about me. I'm very happy to be here, and I hope you find it helpful. The first thing, and that was also the reason why I actually asked you maybe if I could see more faces, because I wanted to ask you a question. And the question is, who of you consider themselves to be compassionate? Emily, Fiona, Rona, Charlotte. And I wonder, you know, maybe the ones I can't see, maybe they thinking also, you know, I feel compassionate. I'm a compassionate person. You as well, Sharon. So I reckon, I would just say generally, we probably have, you know, a couple of really compassionate people in the house tonight. But there's a nice quote that I recently saw, and I thought it was so fitting. It's, compassion that doesn't include yourself is incomplete. So when you think about it this way, would you still consider yourself compassionate? No? And this is a very, very important point, because we're going to talk about feelings that are maybe not as easy. They might not be as acceptable, right? And we need this compassion. We need this compassion to ourselves. So I want to lay the groundwork here tonight. And I want to say that all feelings are valid. Because a lot of the feelings I'm going to talk about: anger after loss, relief, guilt, and anxiety. And a lot of these feelings get a very bad reputation, especially anger, but they're all just feelings. That, you know, they're there, they happen, they're valid, you know, but a lot of the times they're not acceptable, or they're not what other people experience, you know, because when we talk about a loss, tell me, what feeling is acceptable when you suffer a loss, when you experience a loss? What's the accepted feeling? Anyone? Sad? Depressed? But not too depressed, because that could worry other people, right? So you have that. But where do you go? Where do you go with your anger? Should we start with that one? It's one of my favorites, because anger is so good. It can be so good, you know? It's not that violent, you know, all that. Anger is normal. It's okay to have it. And sometimes we can use anger as well. But now, from sort of experience working with bereavement, anger is an emotion that comes into the room very late. Because when you meet somebody, they're very happy to talk about, you know, how sad they are about their loss, how devastated, how difficult their life is, you know, the depression and all that. But the anger comes in way later, and we whisper about it, you know. I actually feel really angry. It's like, okay, why? Because, you know, sometimes, as I said, before you die, there's a lot of life. And you share that with these people, you know, your loved ones, your family. Sometimes they might be your family, but they're not loved ones, right? Because think about it this way: how many people do you know in life that are not actually that nice? Quite a few, I reckon. You know, you don't love everyone, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody passes away, and you mustn't speak ill of the dead. It's a bit of a, you know, what, you know, how does your relationship with that person change that they've gone? So you might carry anger towards a person till, you know, even though they're gone, you know, they're angry and they weren't very nice or very kind to you. So realistically, if you really think about it, how could it be a surprise that all of a sudden it changes everything? Yes, death does change things, but, you know, the relationship with a person hasn't really changed. Because that's the thing, the death in itself, yes, that's a big event, right? But everything that happens before is the attachment, the relationship, you're dealing with that. Richard, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something? No? Okay. So then, you know, obviously the nature of the hospice. I have, you know, a lot of clients that were carers for people who had really long life-limiting illnesses, and they cared for them and did everything. There was a real loss of identity. Their life revolved around hospital visits, pain, you know, sort of pre-bereavement anxiety. And all of a sudden they did pass away at one day. Sometimes you could see it coming a long way. Sometimes it ended up being quite surprising, you know, still. And then there is that little voice that goes like, I'm actually really angry because you left me. You've just gone. We've done all of this. I've done all of this, and you've gone. But what I like to work with is perspective, because are you really angry at the person for having been ill? Or are you really angry because, you know, they are no more? So you're not angry at the person. It's validating you sort of your feeling. You might be angry and it's okay. And sometimes you can say, bloody hell, why did you leave, you know? But the perspective is the anger is not with that person. The anger is at the fact of what happened. Sometimes you want to rage at the doctors who didn't do it right, rage at yourself that you might have missed something, or you know. And when you do that, then there are other people and they're just sad and they go like, why are you angry for? You know, you sort of, it's very isolating. Grief in itself, as I said, can be a very isolating experience. Everybody's fighting their own thing. Everybody's extremely sad by themselves. And then you have that on top of that. You know, people might not understand why you're angry. But it is, you know, the more you're able to actually acknowledge that. You know, sometimes anger is at the top of the iceberg. It kind of also, you know, not only, you know, anger is valid, but sometimes you can sort of mask all the other, even more painful feelings under the anger. You know, you're angry. You said, like, the doctor didn't do that right. The doctor didn't, you know, did the right treatment. But realistically, you're devastated. Does anybody want to say something about anger? Is anybody feeling angry? No? Okay. Shall we go to relief? Because that is also one that is almost a bit like anger, a very different feeling, but it's also a little bit whispered, isn't it? I'm so glad that person actually is gone. And it goes twofold, isn't it? On one hand, it's like genuinely because there might have been a painful illness, there might have something, and you feel like, you know, they're released. And that's okay, and there's relief. But the other one is, again, that person might have not been nice to you, your life. You know, the person might have been outright difficult relationship with them, you know, mean, abusive, what have you, you know, this is all part of it. And it doesn't change that all of a sudden they have passed away. And you're the one who feels relief. While perhaps your family members are devastated, they had very different relationships to the person, and you're the one that can't sort of relate to their grief because you have a very different angle. But it can be confusing because you might be relieved and sad at the same time. So, you know, you again, you sit in that sort of in that space where, you know, where are you going to fit in? How are you going to relate to other people? Again, it's the isolation. And it's, you know, from your own experiences, it's very hard to carve out a space for yourself where you can sit and you can speak these feelings and you can feel them. And just to know these are okay too. You know, even if somebody else is not relieved and they're very sad, but you're relieved, it's okay. Everybody has their own relationships, you know. It's about finding sort of what you need to do and let the other people do, you know, do what they need to do. But you can see that, you know, when we're talking about the grief experience, it's so diverse, it's so complex. It's not just like, you know, when we talk about the stages of grief and we go in marching through the stages and we're doing all our grief work and we're going from A to B, it's not like that. There's so much more that is going on. And yeah, the worry is that, are you grieving right? Are you doing okay? Is that acceptable that you're feeling? You know, shocking, you know, because as I said, you know, don't speak ill, think ill of the dead. And that is part of it. But a really big one, what I found from my experience, is the guilt. Because the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, they're massive. And I would say out of 10 people, at least 8, not maybe even 9, would come and say, I feel guilty. I feel that I've done something wrong. You know, and again, if it is about, you know, anticipated grief, that somebody, you know, has a life-limiting illness and you've been there all the way through, but for some reason, you can't get it right. You've done something wrong, right? You let them down because you might have left the room and that was the moment they passed away. You should have pushed for treatment. They could have, you know, prolonged their life. You shouldn't have pushed for treatment because it was awful for them. Something, whatever it is, there is guilt. And very often what I've observed, the guilt is not from, you know, all the years you spend with the person. It's always sort of very much around the time of death or leading up to death. And I find I find guilt very, very hard, because very often it's not, let's say it feels like that, but it's not something really somebody done wrong, right? And the only thing I've found what I can offer here, again, is perspective. So if you feel guilty about something you did or didn't do, is that the defining moment of that relationship? Is that what defined you in that person? Because you weren't there when they passed away, or you didn't say the last "I love you." Is that what your relationship was, that moment in time? Or did you not have a relationship before that? And it's very hard, because sometimes realistically, I said often there is no reason for guilt, but sometimes obviously there are reasons for guilt. There are things that left unsaid and you can't say them again. And this is a really, really tough job, to sort of pull yourself out there, pull yourself back, and find a way that you find, sort of, this is your piece. This is how you're going to handle that. And very often the only thing that helps is you speak. You need to talk about it, you need to find a space. And the last one is
Kat,
anxiety.
Can I
Of
ask a
course,
question
of
on that?
course.
Yeah,
Go
it's
on.
so interesting that you say that often people feel the guilt is actually around the time leading up to or around their death, rather than something from, a different period or early period in their life. Like, could you just talk a bit more about that?
Okay. So very often, and I'm also talking from my experience, coming a lot from the hospice angle, that when people have cared or looked after somebody and done everything, completely changed their life, and to the detriment of their own identity and everything. But it's always that time when, around that, very often you have somebody, they told me to leave to get a shower to come back, and then that person passed away. Because you can ask any palliative care worker or hospice employee, right, nurse, that people genuinely wait until their loved ones leave the room so they can let go. But there's a lot of guilt around that. And then you have a lot of guilt around that. In my lifetime, I should have said more, I love yous, But while we have life and while we're going through it with a person, it never seems as pressing. There always seems to be time to say these things. And at one point you run out of time and there's no more time. So it was always okay then. But when it happened, they go like, I should have said it. Because I reckon, it's sort of sometimes the awareness with saying all these words, you need to say, or to clear the air, whatever it is you've actually held from a long time. It only becomes aware when you know that, when you become acutely aware that time is limited and you missed your slot. So it's sort of, it always seems to center around that time and not before. Nobody ever, I mean, obviously, this is personal experience, but nobody ever came to like, oh yeah, 20 years ago, I should have done this. It's usually sort of happens around that time, from my experience. Emily, does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective, saying that actually it's only when we look, it's the perspective point that actually you're looking at a particular moment or incident through a lens of a loss, rather than, I don't wake up every day and feel guilty about something that's happening maybe right now in the current world, but it's something I look back on and feel guilt about. That's really interesting.
It's a hyper focus, isn't it? You're very hyper focus of that, because they're sort of where the pain sits as well. And that's, you said it, it's a lens, isn't it? It's the coulda, shoulda, woulda lens, that if you had a do-over, you would do it completely different. So that's a very common experience, but I find it's also the hardest experience, because it's very relatable, right? It's absolutely relatable that, you know, we think if we could do it all again, we would do it much better. We would do it so different. But you, very often in life, you're operating just with what you got, you know, with the information you have, with the person you are, the circumstances, you're operating with that. Hindsight, and pardon my friends, is the bitch.
In fact, Kat, that's what, yeah, if I may say, I'm glad you've clarified that and that Emily asked that, because I thought it's just me, you know, you kind of, I keep thinking if it was back from day one, I would never say any horrible things. I would never, so many things have come into my head. Why didn't I say I wanted to go to that place when he mentioned it?
Yeah.
Why did I refuse that? Had I known we only had this long together, I would have said yes to everything. But you're probably right. It may never have been that. But yeah, it's amazing how we go through our minds with, if I could do it again, it would be like this. But thank you for clarifying that.
No, 100%. Thank you for your input, because this is so real, isn't it? When we have fights, we go like, I would have never done it. I could have just gone to the party, you know, I was tired, whatever. I could have done it for him or her, you know, whatever. I would have never called him, you know, X, Y, and Z, or, you know, would have cooked his favorite dinner more often, of course. But realistically, is it realistic? You know, and is that, again, is that really defining? Is that really the reasons why somebody would feel terribly unloved? You know, or is it just how sort of you went about things, you know, and it's okay because we can't do all the time what, you know, somebody else wants us to do, because boundaries, right? And all that. But yeah, no, absolutely. I completely, you know, understand it. And that's why I said, because it's so relatable and everybody does it. We do all the things. But when you then lose somebody, there's just that hyper focus that you could have been better. And most people, when I really hear them, they've done a pretty good job, you know, and still there's that guilt, and you cannot take that from somebody. You can, you know, offer perspective and see, like, can you look at it this way or that way? And was that the defining moment when you said no to go to the party? What about all the other years? What about all the other times you said yes? What about all the other times you were kind and caring? Do they not count? Yeah. But yeah, guilt is a big one. Guilt is ugly.
Clive's also raised his hand. Did you want to share something, Clive?
Yeah, I wonder if you actually answered my question right at the end there of the question I had, which was, is it too late with anger and guilt? You know, I'm assuming it's, from what you just said at the end there, it's never too late to have conversations with the person who's passed away, whether that's through therapy and getting a perspective, or through writing letters to the person, or even talking to the person. You know, I mean, there must be some way of getting over that guilt and the anger. You know, perhaps with anger, I mean, for example, I'm very angry with my sister for feeling she neglected my mother towards the end. You know, and at the moment, I don't want to have a conversation with her about it because I'm too angry. But I'm wondering how maybe I can have some sort of dialogue in my head with her, or speak it out loud, you know, so somehow I clear this anger, which is, it's eating away at me, you know. And the guilt as well, you know, it's nice that you said that we can get it in perspective by seeing the times we were nice, you know, we were good, we were helpful, we were kind, you know, and getting some sort of realistic balance, because death makes everything very unrealistic, you know, it heightens everything, you know. So yeah, just maybe a few more words about useful therapies and approaches to lessening the impact of guilt and anger.
Yeah, no, thank you, Clive. You raised a really good point that I actually left out, because obviously in the midst of a loss, the world keeps turning and your family has demands, and there's a lot of other relationships that still get going, which can also be complicated. And very often, and Clive, unfortunately, you know, it's quite common that family members are very angry with other family members because they wished, you know, that they would have behaved differently, or they would have been more, you know, as you said, your sister neglected your mum, she could have done more. That you know, happens quite often actually, because again, people, how can I say that? It's because I don't know what your relationship with the sister, between your sister and your mum was. You know, maybe it was also a bit more of a tricky relationship, that maybe your sister found it harder, maybe not, maybe she just didn't have time or didn't want to make time. Whatever the reason is, you're sitting with that feeling, right? And you instead of sort of coming together and, you know, grieving and mourning the loss of your mum, you're sort of like, you know, you're angry. And what really helps is to really look where the anger sits. What exactly, where you're coming from, because as I said, anger sometimes can mask other feelings, you know, like genuinely disappointment, or just, you know, sometimes you're so upset, but it's easier to get angry than upset. And if you are angry, you need to release that, because what we say is like anger turned inwards can lead to depression, right? So there needs to be a release. And if you are ever, you know, feel in a position where you feel that somehow I can't really do it by myself, I strongly, you know, and I'm not being biased, but I strongly, you know, if you don't have a friend you can talk honestly to, who is not, you know, has to take sides sort of thing, you know, find a therapist or find somebody you trust and who's neutral, and you can just say and speak it, because then you already release it and it might lessen. And when it lessens and you kind of know, okay, the anger is coming from this place, or, you know, I'm angry about that, you hopefully, you know, once you get yourself in a more sort of stable, you know, you're stabilizing yourself a position, that you might want to re-engage, you know, to have a conversation at a shouting match, because that's also, you know, when the feelings are running high, and that's often the case, it can, you know, loggerheads instead of real conversation, to say, you know, I was really genuinely upset that you didn't look after mum, and it hurt me, and I know that mum was sad about it. And, you know, and then sort of see how that lands. And very, you know, if that doesn't work, if you can't relate in that way, and if somebody then just goes back into their own and feels defensive, you are going to be sort of left with that. So that is part of your work, to say, I need to kind of release that. I need to get rid of that feeling because I cannot carry on. And that's when you need to speak it, you need to talk to somebody about it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I mean, I do go to therapy, and I do talk about a lot about it then there, and there's similar stories really. I mean, none of the other people have lost their parents, but we're talking through the complicated issues of being in a parental-child relationship, and it's not a fairy story. You know, it doesn't. You know, it doesn't end, a lot of the time it doesn't end happily ever after, you know, so it's just trying to get a realistic perspective on a real relationship, not a fairy tale, you know, so thank you for clarifying.
No, Clive, you're absolutely right, you know, because as I said, there's a lot of living before somebody passes away, and you can't just sort of, that doesn't just go away. And the way we grieve as well hugely depends on the relationship we have and the attachment we have with people. It's not just somebody, you know, all of a sudden we lose somebody and then, you know, we go through the motions. No, the way we are able to grieve a loss of a person depends on how we generally sit in this world, you know, how we generally attach. But I mean, that would go a bit too far, right? But little anecdote, because as I said to you, you know, I was a little bit obsessed with death and, you know, losing my parents. My parents are still luckily alive, but obviously I see them getting older, and I had that worry about them dying. And I was talking to my therapist about it, and she said to me, you know, Kat, you need to do the work now, because when they die, you die with them, and then you have to claw yourself back. So obviously this is not, you know, like your situation, but what it translates to is, if we can, And I know, you know, I'm saying that in a bereavement group because the worst has already happened. But if we can, there's a lot of work to be done before the worst happens. You know, sort of going forward. And it kind of explains our feelings now when it happened, because there was so much going on in life, right? Make sense?
Yeah,
Emily?
Hi.
Oh, I was gonna, Joe had a hand up. Joe, do you want to go first? And then was that, who was that?
Barbara. Yeah.
Yeah, you're if Joe and then Barbara go next.
I was just kind of wondering about anger.
Mm-hmm.
What in reference to, so it was my husband I lost. He had a terminal illness, and he didn't tell anyone about the illness apart from me for a long time. And I was annoyed with him about that when he was alive, and now he's gone. I feel angry because I think that he let himself down more than anything else, because his friends and family wanted to know. And I feel a lot of anger, and it's this whole idea of you want to talk to them, but you can't talk to them because they're not here anymore. And you want to have that argument, and you have, you know, you want to share that anger, which probably would have been a fruitful conversation. But of course, you're never going to get that answer. You can't have that conversation, and you can have that conversation with a counsellor, with a therapist, and I have done, but it's never the same. So the anger remains, you know, and it's kind of, I guess it's kind of, you know, ideas on what to do with that.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Again, you know, I say talk to a therapist, right? And I don't mean it flippant, okay? But it's just, I completely can level with that. The therapist is not your husband, right? You want to have that conversation with him. You know, you want to maybe shout at him or shake him, you know, and say, why are you putting that all on me? You know, you're making me complicit in something I don't agree to. I do it for you because I love you, but I don't agree with that. And you put it all on me. And that is a heavy burden. And I understand your anger. I'll be pissed off. But you want to know how you release it.
I do.
What have you tried? How do you think?
I have tried the therapist and the counselling route. I've tried writing to him. I've tried talking to other people who may think they know how he would respond if I was having this argument with him. But yeah, those are the things I've tried so far. But the conversation still goes around in my head, you know, it just goes around and around until I feel like I wouldn't be satisfied until he's standing in front of me, which of course he would never be. So yeah.
Have you screamed and called him names?
No, I don't think I've gone that far.
You know, you would never know if you don't try. But the thing is with that, again, you know, you said somebody tried to sort of have that conversation with you, pretending to know the answers. You know, we're all doing something, we're trying something impossible, right? But you know your husband. Do you know his motives? Do you know why he done it?
Yes.
Do you feel empathy?
Yes. I understand him. Yeah.
Do you understand him? Okay. But that hasn't helped your anger.
Doesn't help anger. No. Sorry, I've given you a tricky one.
Pardon?
I've given you a tricky one.
No. That's the thing. Again, it's the same with the guilt. These are so relatable feelings. And I'm going to tell you the truth. There is just not one solution, you know. What one finds really helpful, the other one might, you know, somebody else might think it's, you know, not working. But, you know, the thing is what you can do, again, compassion for yourself. It's the most important thing here when we are dealing with these very, very difficult things, to say, do you know what, I'm so bloody angry, I'm so pissed off, you know, use that anger, you know, as I said, scream, hit something, call them names, keep on doing it. And it is such a process as well that you might find yourself waking up one day and you might be a little bit less angry. You know, sort of the anger feelings do turn, isn't it? You hold the anger is just a little bit further away from you. It's not as burning and tight in your chest, you know, because realistically, you're sad.
Yeah.
You're angry and sad, and it's such a thing. And to sit with that, sitting with it is like half the work already. It's not going to just poof and go away, you know, you magic it away. It's not possible. Sometimes you have to sit through it and you have to write it out when it comes. When do you feel most angry?
In waves, no pattern, just in waves.
No pattern. So there is no, you can't really say, okay, this is a situation where I feel really, really angry.
No, it's just in waves from whatever the thoughts are at the time. Yeah, I might try screaming and shouting though.
The thing is,
argue with myself. Yeah.
It's very hard for me to say, right? Because as I said, grief, there is sort of the universal grief experience, but then there's the very individual grief experience, right? And what works for somebody else might not work for you. But, you know, hopefully when time, you know, because anger is a very sort of high energy, you know, lots of brain activity kind of feeling. You can't, you know, for your own sake, you can't keep it up. You know, it needs to be released. Otherwise, anger is very stressful on the body and the brain as well.
Yeah.
So to you know, say, okay, I'm so angry and I will never be able to change that. You know, I will not be able to change your choice. But what I'm able to do is change how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And that's when there's sort of the empathy coming in, you know, because you do feel it. It was not okay what you did. Okay, Emily took up boxing classes. Yes, physical activity, you know, where you power yourself, because as I said, anger is very high energy. Sometimes, you know those ones when you're angry and you want to explode and rip something to shreds and then you end up sobbing.
Yeah.
Once you power yourself out. Because don't underestimate how grief is very, very physical, a very physical experience. And it's just go your way and try to find outlets for that anger. Don't keep it in.
Okay. Thank you.
That's my best advice.
Thank you.
All right.
Barbara, did you want to go next?
No, she actually answered the question, so it's fine. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it was the sort of same question. Well, it was just another one as well when you were saying about your parents that you are doing work towards them probably when they do die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had that with my dad when he had Alzheimer's, and obviously that you know they're going to die, but when it actually happened, it's I think well, for me it was a total difference. Even though you do all the groundwork of they're going to die, I don't think you experience everything until actually that person does die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the feelings I just think it's totally different than when it actually does happen. Well, that's what I found, and anyway. But.
No, I completely agree, and perhaps I haven't really explained that properly, because my sort of situation that I'm referring to wasn't actually really anticipated grief, you know, that because you were dealing with the diagnosis, something you could see, right? And for me, it's been, and luckily still is, sort of very ominous, right? One day, and I travel and this is the last time I'll see them, sort of very diffuse kind of what if mind games that I have. But this is actually a very, very good point you make, because I'm already anticipating how I'm going to feel. Or I did that. I used to completely anticipate how it would be, you know, in my mind, how I get that phone call, how I would feel. And what I've learned that this is absolutely not, there's no way of knowing how I feel. I could obviously, you know, devastated, but maybe whatever would happen, you know, the reason why and how somebody dies, maybe there would be a sense of peace about it. I just don't know. But this is exactly it. Actually, this is it. You never know how you actually will feel. Absolutely right. And this is what I sort of had to learn to kind of stop, you know, these scenarios in my head.
It's just the mad mind, isn't it? Just the thoughts in your head.
It's
That's
it, the catastrophizing, the looking in the future, the anxious mind, right?
I just think I found out you just have to stop thinking and live in the now here, and that's it. That's what I found has helped me. Like I lost my husband 10 months ago to a heart attack, and I just found I was going crazy with all my thinking, and then I started meditating, and that helped me, and just being in the moment and not thinking so many thoughts in your head and your mind that can absolutely drive you crazy and pointless. That's what I found is helping me in any way move forwards.
This is actually, thank you for that, because you kind of sort of gave me a perfect little move over to the anxiety I also wanted to talk about. Because what you said, the meditating is it doesn't work for everybody. Fair enough. If you don't like it, there's many other things you can try, but if it works for you, it's a great way. Because what does the ship do when the storms come in, and you're a little boat and the waves are going high and everything's going mad? What do you do? Put down an anchor. Because sometimes, with a grief, there's a lot of overwhelm as well, where you can't just, everything is too much. And while you can't fix it or sort it out like immediately, what you can do is put down that anchor and just ride it out for a moment, because it's almost like you're threading water, isn't it? There's times, especially, right after the loss, there is that period where you're threading water, you're really trying not to drown. And sometimes it's just riding it out. And that's when you sort of very mindfulness techniques, work or meditation. And if you were interested, I could sort of share a few with you if you like. But I just wanted to say something a little bit around anxiety, right? Because you wouldn't really put it down as, sort of, it's an unacceptable sort of difficult kind of feeling, but it's extremely difficult for the person experiencing it. And this is the death anxiety I was referring at the beginning of this session to, because I'm not sure if you're familiar, sort of, it's very existentialist. And in life, it's estimated that people only feel death anxiety twice. And that's the real raw and naked fear of your own death. And we're very good at, because we know it, but we push it back in our minds, right? I mean, why do we create? Why do we write books? Why do we make songs? Why do we build houses? Why we have children? To just push that all in the back of our mind, to make our life full and create. That's the absolute antidote to death, right? Creation. But when we experience that, it's usually around a time where you either are confronted with your own mortality, if you had a diagnosis, that is threatening to your life, or if you lose somebody. And it's like the rug's being pulled under you, and all of a sudden everything is dangerous, Anxiety is fight or flight, is a threat where no imminent threat exists, but your brain, tricks you. And it's understandable when you experience something so extreme of loss of a loved one, that, sometimes you might also feel like, you might die, all your loved ones will die. Life just seems a lot more scary. And anxiety, again, is a very physical experience. You can't sleep, you feel irritable, you have a constant sense of dread, you have a constant sense of being on edge. There's so many physical symptoms with anxiety, right? And it's also that living in the future, that sort of, not knowing what's coming, that fuels it. What you just said, sort of, your mind goes and it goes in the future, because in the future is where anxiety lives. So what you need to do is you always need to bring yourself back in the moment. And it's all about, here, okay, am I safe? Am I sitting in my living room? Am I safe? This is not, it's not going to solve everything. Sometimes all you need to do is write it out. And I say all you need to do, right? But this is it. And I don't know if you wanted to know a little bit about any techniques, or if you know them already, if you practice them already, if you wanted to share maybe a good one that you found, because it's quite difficult. Not everything works for everyone. So I don't know. Or you're right. Who's going first?
Some ideas for techniques if you've got some.
Oh, you're a bit quiet, Rune. Oh yeah, I'd be up for some techniques as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other people up for it too?
Yes.
Yes, please. All right, cool. So this one is the simplest one you can do everywhere. And this is, you know, when you feel that sense of dread and you feel yourself getting really anxious. And the beauty of that, you can do it everywhere, and it's very sort of, you can do it low level, you know, nobody needs to, so that you're doing massive deep breathing and lying on the floor, but you can just do it in the office, at home, in the supermarket. And it's really, the idea is rooting yourself. So wherever you are, because touch is very powerful for your brain. So it works in the sense you can do it to yourself. It's, you know, might look a bit weird potentially, but you can start stroking yourself. You know, sort of a very self-soothing exercise. And the brain, when it connects with yourself, it does. I'm not a neuroscientist, but, you know, so I've been told that, you know, the whole touch helps. And then you also have the rooting. You can plant your feet really onto the floor, or you can grab onto a chair really hard that you feel yourself as well grabbing, and then you just root yourself. And the mantra is, you're safe. You here right now. This, right? It's quite quick. And if it's a really bad anxiety attack, you know, you might need more than that. And one I like, deep breathing always, you know, very, very deep breath into the belly, sort of steady yourself. And then you engage your senses. And that too brings you back into the moment. What do I see? I see a helium balloon. I actually do. My room. What do I smell? Smell my hand cream. What do I hear? People in a park outside. And what do I feel? Feel the table, my arms on the table. And sort of you engage the senses and sort of bring yourself back to you, because it's about riding out the wave that's about to crush you. And I mean, there's lots more, but I think it would just kind of, you know, take us a little bit too far. But I wanted to ask you, because I'm also mindful of the time and I don't know how everybody's feeling. Are we all okay?
Yeah.
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 I was wondering about the compassion. How are we all doing for the compassion? Thanks, Rona. How are we all doing for compassion? How are we feeling that? Could we give that to ourselves? That when we find ourselves angry or guilty or having not done enough, not been good enough husbands and wives or partners or mums and dads, can we be compassionate? What do you reckon?
So hard to be compassionate to yourself. I really struggle with it. I know it's important. And then I get annoyed at myself for not being compassionate with myself. And then it's a vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm. But don't forget, compassionate doesn't include you as incomplete, right? And there is a whole there's a whole amount of resources on the internet, actually. And I think it's called selfcompassion.org. And they have some really, really wonderful exercises you can do if you were that way inclined. And if you want, I'd like to share one with you, because it's also it's a very straightforward one. And I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with it. Because, you know, when you're, as you said, you go in a vicious circle and then you end up beating yourself up verbally, right? We do that a lot on Worst Enemies. But the question is always, would you talk like that to a friend? Would you ever? Would you, Emily? No. So what you can do, right, to practice self-compassion is really to think about an instance where you don't have any compassion for yourself. Think about it. And then think about a friend would be feeling like that. And you, at that moment, you're at your best, you know, you're in good friend caregiver mode, and you know, what would you say to them? You write down what you say to them, and you also write down what voice would you use, what tone would you use, right? Then you obviously switch it around and say, what would you say to yourself? And what tone would you use then? And once you've done that, go look at the differences and see if what you would say to the friend, if you would say that to yourself, what difference would that make? What would it change? How would you feel? It's a short little exercise. But the thing is, with everything that we're going to start and do new, it needs practice because it doesn't come easy, right? So it's almost like, you know, you need to learn how to walk, you need to learn how to eat with a spoon, all these little baby steps. You know, you build that in your day. You could say, you know, every evening at 8:30, I'm going to do this because today I have not been kind to myself. And that's not okay. Do you know what? I think I talked enough, and I would really love, to you know, take any questions or hear anything from you, really. So don't be shy.
I think this has really been helpful, Kat. It's really, really been so helpful. Just to talk about the feelings is so important because they've been so intense for me, up and down like a river flowing, and then a deep sea with its waves. It's just not spoken about either. So I really, really thank you, appreciate this, because each day is very different, I find, since I've lost my husband, and yeah, but you've helped me to just take on board some of the things around compassion, because, you know, we can all hold ourselves guilty forever and time and forever. And I just wonder that, as you've said, I reflect, and there are times when, lots of times when I have said yes. So thank you for that. Yeah.
I'm sure you have. And I'm sure, you know, if you were to beat yourself up, I wonder what your husband would say. Thank you. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, darling. Hi.
I see a familiar face. Hi.
Hi, sweetheart. I have been listening to you. I'm dealing with my mum. She's got Alzheimer's, and she's got a terminal diagnosis of multiple myeloma. And as you said earlier, it's like a slow death, watching someone who's dying slowly. And I've been struggling with my grief of watching her, knowing that she's not here for much longer. I'm struggling with my children as well. You know, they've been looking after her, living in her house, and I've been going there, and it's almost like we're almost fighting about who's going to look after her next, who's going to be there to help out next, and it's very hard. You go through a lot of emotions. You're watching someone die. You're feeling very overwhelmed by it all. You're trying to be cheerful, but also you're a bit annoyed with the other members of your family. Why is it down to me? You know, you're the one that's not working, so you do everything. Well, okay, I will, but also I have a life too. It's almost that guilt of like, I want to be there, but I can't always be there. It's very difficult. I can understand people who've said that. There's a gentleman who explained about he's angry with his sister.
Clive, yeah.
Yeah, Clive, not doing enough. And I always feel I'm not doing enough, although I think I am, but it's all very weird. That's all I can say. It's just very weird feelings. There's so many mixtures of emotions. My dad doesn't want to tell people that my mum's dying. If I slip up and tell anyone, he has to go at me. Yeah, it's hard. Death is such a hard thing to work your way through. All the emotions it throws up, as you said, it throws up so many emotions.
Anticipatory grief, right? But you can already see, and this is also what I meant, it's like you're already feeling like that. So why do people for some reason expect that all of a sudden when the death then happens, everything is different? You know, it makes actually no sense really, isn't it? You still kind of have to process what actually just went on and how you felt, and it's not made easier. And then when family involved, it can get very, very muddled. And I think, as I said, you know, from the very beginning, just be very clear that your feelings are all right. You know, they're absolutely valid. You feel them if you have. Try to lessen them, get rid of them, speak them. You know, don't keep them in. You know, and so thanks, Sharon. I'm sure we can, we can catch up with that separately. And I also saw Richard's message. Thank you, Richard.
He was just sharing. I'm conscious of time, and I want to wrap up so that everyone can go and scream into a pillow. I think a lot of us are going to be doing. But Charlotte, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to just one more? Charlotte, would you like to share something, and then we'll wrap up if that's okay with everyone?
Oh, thank you, Emily. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you, Kat. That was really interesting. And talking about difficult emotions, I noticed that as you were talking about them to start with, tears were beginning to fall when you were talking about guilt. So that kind of told me that I've got something unresolved there, because that's what set them off. And I thought it was something that I dealt with, but I don't think I have. And I've had 3 losses in 2 years, unfortunately. So there's a few bits and pieces, but that was very telling. That just you talking about it, that's what triggered me. And I thought, right, that's what I think I need to work on.
But you're paying attention, Charlotte.
Yes.
No, not to me, not to me, not to me. You're paying attention to yourself. You know, you have an awareness.
Absolutely. Well, I'm like you. I'm an integrative counsellor, but I haven't fully qualified because of a bereavement last year. So I'm taking quite a lot of time out. I'm nearly there, but not quite. So yes, as you know, you have to learn to listen to your body and see what it's telling you.
Yeah, and that's good advice for everyone. Right?
It's not easy to do though.
Nobody said it was. And I completely appreciate, you know, that in this sort of setting, we can't really go into the details, right? Because there's obviously so much going on. As we all know, it's extremely complex. It's extremely heartbreaking and difficult. But I'm very happy to have, you know, seen you and had so many people come today, because as I said, it's isolating. Don't, you know, Untangle is such a good thing, you know, to have that community. Sometimes you need to talk to somebody else than your family, you know, and so maybe I'll see you some other time.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Kat.
Definitely hope so. And yeah, thank you, everyone. For
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening and take care and look after yourselves. Be kind to each other
bye-bye.
and yourself.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.